In order to take over his daughter's body, the father first deliberately sent his wife away, then asked his daughter to help him move things. Unexpectedly, the daughter, who had always been at odds with him, agreed. The father secretly felt pleased. He then took Sarah to the basement. Although Sarah felt uncomfortable in the dark and cramped basement, she soon felt guilty, thinking that the man in front of her was her father. So what could he possibly do to her? Little did she know that it was exactly her inner unease that led to her being imprisoned in the dark basement for 24 years. At that point, Sarah had not realized the severity of the situation and thought it was just a punishment from her father for running away from home. But when she opened a box of miscellaneous items, she found her own intimate clothing inside and realized her father never intended to let her out. She tried inputting passwords to open the door, but after 3 consecutive incorrect attempts, the room would be cut off from power. Sarah then found a flashlight in the box and shouted for help through the ventilation pipes in the room. Hearing her cries for help, her father wrapped the pipe opening with a blanket and pressed books on top so it wouldn't be easily discovered. At night, the family sat in the living room, and the mother quickly reported Sarah's disappearance to the police. However, Alan, the father, convinced the mother not to worry, saying that their daughter often stayed out overnight. Time soon moved to the next day, and Sarah continued trying to input the door code, but the result was still not in her favor. After some time, Sarah heard the sound of a door opening outside. She quickly hid behind a pillar, and when Alan opened the door, she seized the opportunity to push him hard against the wall and then ran towards the outside. She thought she would soon see the light of day, only to find there was another password door outside the main door. Her attempt to escape thoroughly angered Alan, who slowly approached Sarah, grabbed her hair forcefully, and violently dragged her back into the room. Sarah asked why he was keeping her locked up. She wanted to make one last struggle, but all her efforts were in vain. Alan warned her that she must obey the rules in that place and could strive for anything she wanted by herself. Seeing her not responding to his words, Alan made a perverted decision. He forcibly pinned her against the door and humiliated her for a long time. After the event, Alan looked at his work with satisfaction, while Sarah couldn't help but vomit into the sink. When Alan went upstairs, he found police were already questioning his wife about Sarah's whereabouts. Alan told the police that Sarah had long ago planned to run away and that some of her personal clothing and luggage were missing, so the police took it as a rebellious act, which led to the matter being left unresolved. Sarah was meanwhile shouting for help through the ventilation pipes, but all her efforts proved to be futile. In a daze, Sarah thought about the moments she had shared with her boyfriend Chris and pinned her hopes on him, hoping he would notice her peril. Sure enough, Chris, who hadn't heard from Sarah for a while, came to her house. But Alan lied, saying Sarah had eloped with Steve, a childhood friend of hers. Chris felt betrayed and gave up on pursuing Sarah. Time flew by, and it was Sarah's 18th birthday. Alan prepared a birthday cake for her, and even gave her a red dress as a gift. Wearing the dress, Sarah looked radiant, and Alan was pleased with this. He let her choose something, and Sarah asked for a pocket watch, to which Alan agreed, with conditions attached. 38 days later, when opening a can, Sarah realized the lid was very sharp and could be her tool for escape. When Alan arrived, she dressed up finely and stood before him with the tool hidden behind her, planning to attack when possible. But alert Alan was prepared and scolded Sarah for not understanding his hard work. A year later, Sarah's swollen belly was ready for childbirth. Suddenly, her water broke, and never having given birth before, she panicked but had to follow the methods outlined in books for self-delivery. Kneeling in helplessness in a corner, her cries echoed through the basement. Having to rely solely on her strength for the delivery, with the baby's first cries, 19-year-old Sarah became a mother for the first time. Alan showed no reaction to the newborn, even considering it beneficial that Sarah wouldn't be lonely. He provided her with simple necessities. At this point, Sarah had no more thoughts of escape. 4 years quickly passed by. Sarah's mother never gave up looking for her missing daughter and suggested hiring a private investigator at the dining table, but Alan immediately vetoed this idea, deeming it a waste of resources. Meanwhile, the basement had turned into a warm little family, with Alan shuttling back and forth between the two households daily. On one occasion, Sarah's daughter showed her drawing to Alan. The man in front of her was both her father and grandfather. Another 7 years passed, with the mother sitting at the entrance, hoping for Sarah's return. Meanwhile, Sarah had given birth to a boy for Alan. When the daughter suddenly had a serious asthma attack, Alan only brought simple medication, which Sarah found to be for adults. Alan believed reducing the dosage by half would be effective and hurriedly left, leaving a helpless Sarah standing there as her son cried in fright. Sarah had no choice but to swallow her grievances, and only after recounting stories were the children able to sleep. Upstairs, Alan's elder daughter suspected he was keeping Sarah hidden, leading to an argument with him. After the argument, the sisters spotted keys left on the sofa by Alan. She took the keys to the basement, hoping to find traces of Sarah. But Alan stopped her with a shout, demanding she return the keys, and the sisters just brushed past each other. At this time, Sarah strained to give birth to her third child. However, the narrow space wasn't sufficient for the children. She wanted Alan to take them up to live, thinking it would comfort her mother and help raise the children while she could find time to serve Alan. The next day, the mother found the child at the door with a note from Lisa indicating everything was fine and asking the mother to care for her child. Overjoyed, the mother brought the child inside, failing to notice the note in the basket, which Alan discreetly removed. Returning to the basement, he read the note aloud to Sarah, who stood silently. Alan was angered by Sarah's move and threw the red dress at her, making his intentions clear. Sarah had to accept the repeated humiliation. 14 years later, her elder daughter had grown into a woman, adept at makeup and dressing. Watching her, Alan's gaze held perverse intent. Sarah warned him not to have any improper thoughts towards their daughter, threatening to kill him otherwise. Alan was notably irritated by this and cut off the power again. The asthmatic daughter could only lean at the ventilation shaft, gulping for fresh air, while Sarah softly comforted her. Suddenly, her daughter asked how she knew Alan, but Sarah didn't elaborate. 17 years passed swiftly, and during a downpour, Sarah's fourth child was about to be born. Rainwater seeped through the cracks, dripping into the basement, which gave Sarah hope for escape. The three of them quickly moved a table over, and Sarah carefully climbed the walls, discovering the softened ceiling, providing a chance for escape. She used a spoon to dig out the cement, working from day to night, finally making a small hole. She used a flashlight to send out distress signals, which were fortunately seen by a neighbor walking their dog, who then informed Alan at his door. Furious, Alan went to the basement, saw Sarah still on the table, and punched her face without hesitation. Alan vented his anger, and Sarah felt blood on her face after the blow. Amid guttural screams, her fourth child sadly died at birth and was buried by Alan that night. 18 years later, Alan's company implemented layoffs, and he warned Sarah not to show him bad attitude, otherwise, she'd have no reason to stay secluded. He then bragged about the third child's life outside, prompting the second son to question when he'd be allowed out. Alan shifted blame to Sarah, suggesting compliance with rules would lead to freedom, causing the children to mistakenly blame Sarah for confinement. Rarely, Sarah vented her pent-up fury, having silently endured for 18 years for her children's sake. After the argument, Sarah decided to reveal the truth to them, recounting her defiance and subsequent imprisonment in the basement. Finally understanding, the children realized their mother's plight. Once Alan was laid off, living supplies dwindled, leading Sarah to argue for more, only to be brushed off nonchalantly by Alan. Her son's aggression incited a more orderly response, resulting in another intentional power cut. Under financial duress, Alan devised a twisted plan. One night, he connected a hose to the ventilation shaft, the other end to a car exhaust, intending to poison the three silently, but son number 3's sudden appearance interrupted the plan. 20 years later, the eldest daughter's asthma worsened severely, her complexion ghostly pale. Meanwhile, a party was underway with son number 3 celebrating, contrasting sharply the lives within the same property. Nightfall brought Alan before them, with Sarah pleading tearfully to take the daughter to a hospital until Alan reluctantly agreed. En route, Sarah took in the surroundings, and within moments, they reached the hospital, the daughter barely clinging to life. Prompt treatment saved her, allowing Sarah to breathe a sigh of relief. But without prior medical records, the hospital required additional information. Despite this, Sarah didn't seize the opportunity to call for help. Instead, she maneuvered subtly, avoiding Alan's watchful eyes, knocking over a cup, strategically deploying a distraction. Alan, engaged in a phone conversation, missed the cue. Inspired, she took a decisive step forward.